What is the greatest, F it, I'll do it myself, in history? In 1888, Almond Brown Strowger, an undertaker, noticed he was losing a lot of business to the other undertaker in town. He found out that the other undertaker's wife was a telephone operator, and when she intercepted people asking to be connected to Strowger's funeral home, the operator would route the call to her husband's funeral home instead. 3 years later, Strowger patented the automatic teller exchange, a system which allowed telephone users to make calls without the need for human operators, single-handedly destroying an entire workforce. Barry Marshall. He thought the ulcers were caused by bacteria, but couldn't get ethics approval for human testing. So he drank H. pylori bacteria himself, and developed ulcers 3 days later, which confirmed his theory. This is very personal for me, but my grandpa, who raised me with my grandma, retired as an engineer, was bored and saw a need for what back then was called mobility equipment. He invented the standing frame in the 1980s. It allowed people with spinal issues, e.g. quadriplegia, to be transitioned from lying down to vertically standing up, fully supported and safe without them leaving their bed. He made quite a few variations for different sizes and ages, and they sold all over the world. He simply said, "No one else was helping, so I did." All from our suburban garage in Sydney, Australia. He was awarded an Order of Australia, one of our country's highest honors. He was my hero. Girolamo Cardano was a mathematician in the Renaissance who was trying to find a generalized solution for the roots of cubic functions. One of the problems that kept popping up was he needed to take the square root of negative numbers, something traditional, real number, algebra wouldn't allow. Cardano, instead of writing it off as impossible, simply decided that these imaginary numbers, as they were called later, must exist, an astoundingly controversial opinion at the time. Now we use them every day. Napoleon. Dude busted out of prison and got the army that was against him on his side. You know that old wives' tale about how cracking your knuckles will cause arthritis? Well, Dr. Donald Unger decided to test that theory in the most extreme way he could. Once a day for 50 years, he cracked the knuckles in his left hand but not in his right hand. Neither hand developed arthritis, thus disproving the old wives' tale. 50 years, people. The dedication is just chef's kiss. Maybe not the greatest, but George Lucas wanted to make a Flash Gordon movie. They wouldn't give him the rights, so he wrote his own space opera, created his own special effects company, and basically became a multi-billionaire by making the biggest money-making movie franchise there ever was. At least for a while. It's not exactly a, fuck it I'll do it myself, but a professor called Richard Scoilver along with his research partner Georgina Long had developed breakthrough melanoma research and treatments. Last year Scoiler was diagnosed with a type of grade 4 brain cancer that was incurable. So him and his partner developed a new experimental treatment, with Scoiler being the first patient to receive it. A year later Scoilver appears completely cured with no sign recurrence of the brain tumor. Leo Major liberates Smola by himself out of sheer rage and spite. Went to scout out German #S and said fuck it, I'm doing this solo. One man versus about 200,300 Germans. I have bought some of the most famous Gran Turismo cars, he would later say, and in each of these magnificent machines I have found some faults. Too hot, or uncomfortable, or not sufficiently fast, or not perfectly finished. Now I want to make a GT car without faults, a perfect car. In 1963, Ferruccio founded Automobili Lamborghini, employing a talented team that included Giampaolo Dallara, Paolo Stanzani, and New Zealander Bob Wallace, with Giotto Bizzarini as a consultant. Lamborghini built his factory on farmland in Sant'Agata Bolognese, an easy commute for the skilled workers employed by Ferrari and Maserati in nearby Modena. Sony going into gaming industry after failed partnership with Nintendo on CD add-on. The rest is the history of one of the best-selling home video game consoles, PlayStation. My vote goes to Dashrath Manji. When his wife died in 1959 after being injured from falling from a mountain and due to the same mountain blocking easy access to a nearby hospital in time, he decided to carve a 110 meters long, 360 feet, 9.1 meters wide, 30 feet, and 7.7 meters deep, 25 feet, path through a ridge of hills using only a hammer and a chisel. Source. Well, he probably didn't say, fuck it, but Georges Lemaitre was a Belgian priest, astronomer who basically came up with what is now known as the Big Bang Theory. He was at the famous, at least for physicists, 1927 Solvay conference, and while he was still fresh off getting his PhD, he managed to get to talk to Einstein about his idea of an expanding universe that started with a singularity. He was this young upstart kid among some of the greatest minds of the age, Marie Curie, Niels Bohr, Heisenberg, Dirac, and Einstein was dismissive of his notion, saying, "From the point of view of physics this seems to me abominable." Lemaitre was right, of course, and years later Einstein had to admit that he was wrong. Ol' mate that removed his own appendix in Antarctica. Or the Aussie nurse who was working out bush and treated his own STEMI. While not world-changing, my wife had cancer and was going in and out of the hospital for months because of a life-threatening infection. There were a lot of things that I didn't like about her care. She finally got better, but her doctors said that she was going to be having GI problems and probably cancers for the rest of her life. I wanted her to have better care than she had gotten up to that point, so I quit being an engineer, went back to school, and became a registered nurse. Then, a few years later, she cheated on me with a guy she worked with who would post on Facebook about how there were dinosaurs on Noah's Ark.